we've got to talk about the economy and some much-needed good news. The Times newspaper report that an economic think tank has forecast that Britain will avoid a recession not only in the final 3 months of 2022, but throughout 2023. That's right, no recession this year. So they say. The National Institute of Economic and Social Research predictions are in stark contrast with a gloomy forecast from the International Monetary Fund last week, which said that Britain would be the only leading economy to suffer a contraction this year. So is this once again experts getting it wrong about Brexit Britain? Let's speak to top economics expert and financial wizard Jonathan Davis from Jonathan Davis Wealth Management. First of all, Jonathan, your reaction to this rather sunnier picture outlined by this think tank?
It's certainly optimistic. My own analysis shows that in the last quarter, corporate profits have started falling, inflation has started falling, which you'd think would be a good thing. It will eventually, but why does inflation fall? It's because there's less demand. And I think we're going to see that repeated in this quarter. And my analysis tells me we're going to see it for a third quarter, in other words, the second quarter of 23. So they may well be right that we will avoid a technical recession, which, as most people know, is 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. But that's hardly the point. We're going to have lacklustre growth, if at all, and we're going to see falling house prices, falling share prices, and rising unemployment.
Indeed, it's not a great outlook. But do you feel that there's something politicised about this modelling, especially coming from the IMF, who I would humbly suggest don't think much of Brexit?
Probably is the answer. Clearly, the establishment for years, for decades, has been against the notion of the UK leaving the European Union. I would say to you, Mark, have we actually left the European Union? The European Court of Justice is still our top court. The lady you've just had on from Northern Ireland, they're still in the EU, in effect. I think technically, I don't believe we've actually left the EU yet. Maybe we will do in the future, but certainly whether Remain or Brexit, it has nothing to do with how the UK economy is doing.
You've made a lot of money for your clients with your accurate predictions. You told me about inflation on my radio show 2 years ago. You were proved right, and they laughed. How they laughed, Jonathan. What's your view about the dark art of financial modelling? Because the IMF have been wrong for a long, long time now, haven't they?
Well, it's all agenda-driven. We used to talk about the investment banks would tell the news guys what they wanted their clients to hear and then do something entirely differently. But now it's, as you say, the IMF, it's the Treasury, it's the Bank of England. It is generally politicised. That is certainly the case.
I mean, the modelling has been, about as accurate as COVID modelling in recent years, hasn't it?
Well,
almost spooky parallels between the two.
Well, I mean, to even suggest that COVID modelling has had any accuracy is very interesting, because I don't think that's the case. But where they've been saying that there will constantly be economic growth or there will be economic destruction because of Brexit, which is original point, absolute arrant nonsense.
OK, so this year, a challenging year. What's the medium-term outlook? Can my viewers be hopeful that things will get better in the years to come?
It depends what you mean by better. What I expect is going to happen is we will have a mild recession. Certainly the United States, I think, will have a recession.
Germany's in recession?
Well, it certainly is. The 4th largest economy on the planet. America, the largest economy on the planet.
Is that, by the way, America and Germany are in trouble. Is that because of Brexit too?
Yeah, must be. It must be. And the Maoris, I think, are in there as well, and the Aztecs.
It's all Brexit's fault.
It's the Abyssinians from 4,000 years ago, I believe, actually. So if America's in recession and Germany clearly is, well, why would Britain be any different? However, it might be a mild recession, which won't last that long, 6, 9 months maybe. But look, what's going to happen at the end of 2024? The UK is going to have a general election. In America, there's going to be a presidential election. So naturally, the governing politicians are going to open the spigots. They're going to, in fact, team up with the commercial banks, and they're going to get the banks to lend, because they want to stop house prices falling, massive vote loser. House prices are falling just now. They have been since the autumn or even the summer of last year. They will continue falling. Unemployment will be rising. So, of course, the politicians have got their eye on about a year and a half from now. That's what they're focused on. Always the short term, always the next election, never the long-term prosperity of the nation or of the people. So what that will result in, by the end of this year, we will start to see green shoots of spring, as they say, and the economy will grow a bit in 2024. The politicians will say, hey, we cracked it. But to get there, it means more money in the system. That's what we mean by lending. There'll be more money in the system. That creates inflation, which means that longer term, we, the British people, will have higher costs of living, higher costs of doing business, and longer term, that will be a dampener on economic prospects. Inflation is a bad thing for the economy. Falling prices is a great thing. Wouldn't you like to have lower energy prices, a lower cost of buying a car, buying a house? Everyone would love it. Buying food. But of course, the politicians, they want inflation. And unfortunately, they will get it. It will help them in the election next year, but we will be the ones who will pay for it for the long term.
So slightly higher inflation is almost a political and economic conspiracy. It helps the government. I guess it burns away at their debt as well.
Well, that actually is their objective, their implied objective. They are actually doing what we saw from after the Second World War till the late 1970s, about a 30-year period. It's called financial repression. And when we left World War II, debt to GDP was 150%. And that was terrible. They needed to get debt down. By the early 1980s, it was down to 35%. Where are we now?
100.
120%. And that's just the government. Corporate add-on, household add-on, it's twice. It's 300% of GDP. After World War II, it was bad enough, it was 150%. So this is the challenge that the governments for the last 30 years have given us, and the only way that they are going to solve the problem that they've given us is by giving us inflation for the next 20 years. 90% of the British population will be more and more impoverished due to this inflation.
I see, and you don't think that the government will be angling for 10 or 15% inflation, but something like 5%. So getting rid of that target.
More than that, it'll be 5 to 10% per annum inflation for the next 10 to 20 years, bearing in mind, for the last 30 years, until last year, we had sub 5%. For 30 years, it'll be 5 to 10% per annum.
So lower interest rates are a thing of the past.
Actually, they will do whatever they need to cap interest rates. I'm not one of those people who say with high inflation comes 10, 20% interest rates. No, as a plank of financial repression, actually, they will keep interest rates down. We saw them go to about 4.5% last year. I can't actually expect them to see them go much higher than that. But what that will do is, if you think through it, that will actually fuel even higher inflation by keeping the interest rates down.
Who's in more trouble, the United States, the Eurozone, or the UK?
They have equal-sized problems. Probably the US, of those three, will probably do better because the US dollar remains the global reserve currency and it has far more clout than the euro or little sterling.
Is there a danger that the world economy could just fall over? And if so, when? And what does that look like for my viewers?
No, we will have a mild recession globally. And in fact, over the next 10, 20 years, we'll see, as we'll see a couple of years of economic growth. Then we'll have a year or so of economic recession, then 2 or 3 years of boom, then 1 year of... So in other words, it'll be short cycles.
You think it's manageable? You don't think it's going to fall over?
It's not going to fall over. They will not allow that to happen. If they did, then they themselves, they being the elite and the connected, they themselves personally would have problems. They're not going to allow that to happen.
Let me ask an economist a political question. Who wins the next election?
The two main political parties win the next election, as has happened for decades.
In other words, whoever gets in, it will be more or less the same policies.
Of course it will.
Jonathan Davis, on that outrageous note, thank you for joining us. Always fascinating. Jonathan is behind the Booms and Busts podcast. Do give it a listen. He is also the CEO of the Jonathan Davis Wealth Management Company. A fascinating conversation. Keep your opinions coming. Mark at GBNews.uk.